We're going to talk about Jace Jung, Colt Keith, the future of the Detroit Tigers infield, and more. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Friday, June 21st, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Tigers is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Did you know that it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS? Don't wait. Reduce your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals. Call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/locked on. Happy Friday to all. The Tigers kick off a 3-game set against the Chicago White Sox at Comerica Park this weekend. We will preview that at the very end of the show, but it goes without saying, please win. Please win. I think the tune of the fan base has already plummeted really in the last 13 games, right? Being 3-10 in your last 13 is not going to inject a lot of hope and optimism into a fan base, but this White Sox team is horrific. Okay? And like they're going to face a pitcher this weekend that actually has had a pretty good year, and I think that's, I don't know if I'm going to call it cause for concern because the Tigers are spiraling, but I think that's something to look out for. Again, we'll talk about that in the preview, but this is a really bad baseball team. We're approaching the halfway mark in the season, and they have 20 wins. This is a all-time bad baseball team. So please win. Okay, we'll start the series or the episode rather. Well, hopefully, and the series with that, talking about hopefully getting some wins. But I'll peek behind the curtain here. I tried. I tried so hard. I tried to just wait this out, but it doesn't look like that is going to happen as I'm recording this, I don't know, around midnight as it turns into Friday a little bit after. And I tried to outwait a potential news story about Jace Jung. Because on Friday's game, Mud Hens game, in Friday evening, Jace Jung was scheduled to start, play third base, business as usual, as he's done for most, if not all, of the season. And right before the game started, the Mud Hens made an announcement that Jace Jung was pulled from the game. He did not play at all in the game. So there was a lot of speculation, and there still is, at the time of this recording, at least, a lot of speculation about a potential Jace Jung call-up. Obviously, that's something that would be really fun and exciting, and I would certainly welcome it. Anybody who can even remotely hit a baseball, I'm down to give an opportunity on this Major League team. I really am. My standards are alarmingly low, like embarrassingly low. So if that's the direction they want to head, then so be it. That's great. The issue is there has been no report. For all I know, again, at the time of this recording, maybe he has the flu. I have absolutely no idea. Maybe he stubbed his toe. So I tried to outwait it as long as I could, and I have to record a show. So here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about Jace Jung just in general, because even if he doesn't get the call up, I still think that it's a conversation worth having because he has been hitting. Actually, in the last 5 or 6 games, he's kind of he doesn't have too much production, but overall in the season, he's having a really good year. So far in Toledo, he is hitting .270 with an .890 OPS and 11 home runs in 64 games. That's 41 RBIs for those keeping track, 62 hits in those 64 games. He has 47 walks, so an OBP of almost 400, and 64 strikeouts in 64 games. Now, when talking about Jace Jung, I think it's important to remember going into the season, the expectations were for him to take another step forward. They were not for him to be in the majors in like the first half of the year, at least, maybe a September call up. But I think most people had their eyes on the year after this one. One of the biggest areas that the organization pointed out that they wanted him to focus on was strikeout rate and swing and miss rate in general. He has kind of a weird, I mean, if you've ever seen him swing, the way that his hands are positioned is odd. And it has led to, obviously, he has benefited greatly from it so far in his career. He's hit well at every level. He was a first-round pick. He crushed at Texas Tech. Was a guy that I wanted going into, I did the show I do every year, which we're doing again, by the way. Going to plug that now. Guys over at Motor City Metrics, I've been on that draft show, man, probably 4 or 5 years in a row now. And we're doing that again. So be sure to tune in to that. A lot of more information will come as we get closer to the draft. We'll do a lot of draft coverage on here as well. But he was a really good prospect, one that I wanted on draft night. And I think that so far he has hit really well, but there's been a lot of strikeouts. And in the month of June, which is albeit what, a 20-game sample size, maybe not even, the strikeout numbers have lowered quite a bit, a noticeable amount. And so his overall strikeout rate on the season has gone down much. It was rather high early in the season this year. And so that's something to point to and be like, wow, like adjustments are being made, something they directly wanted him to work on. He is working on. 2 thumbs up there. This is obviously a kid that can hit and hit with some pop as well. He is a lefty. And against lefties in AAA, he has a mid-700s OPS, right? It's not anything terrible, but it's not like jump off the page amazing either. A 250 average against lefties. Against righties, he's hitting 277 with an OPS over 1,000. So a lot of his power and a lot of his on-base coming from the right-handed platoon pitcher. So I think that that's something to keep an eye out too, being that we all know our manager loves platooning more than anything on this planet. Now that transitions me into one of the main talking points of this episode, if not the main talking point, which is what to do defensively. Now we'll start with if he is getting called up. If he is getting called up, then I think, you can just play him at third base sometimes, and nobody's the wiser, right? I mean, Gio Urshela has played first base. Matt Bierling has played all over the field, right? Like, you can just do that if you really want to see this through at third, right? You could just have him play some third. You also could have him play some second. And I think that that's where a really interesting conversation has kind of maybe not begun, because I feel like it begun a few weeks ago even, but has really picked up steam here over the last couple of days. And that is what we are going to talk about right after this. Got to talk to you all today about our friends over at Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? Well, that's what I get with Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. I just give my stylist my size, style, budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want, and there's no subscription required. And they send 5 just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep what works and I send back the rest. My stylist always sends just right pieces and the fit is on point. It is truly remarkable how good they all are at their jobs. I don't know how they do it, but they just get me. So get style that makes you feel as good as you look. Now is the best time to get started on Stitch Fix as well. StitchFix.com/MLB. You can get $100 off. That's $25 off your first 4 fixes, for a limited time only. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $100 off. Stitchfix.com/MLB. Must redeem within 7 days of sign up. Offer does not include kids fixes. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always, making us your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. And we will be back on Monday with or without Jace Jung on the Major League roster. We will be back recapping this series against the White Sox and, of course, talking about any and all things that are surrounding this lovely, just sunshine and rainbows organization right now. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day, bringing you the biggest stories without all the screaming maybe that Fox Sports or ESPN gives you on a daily basis. Be sure to check it out on YouTube, again, Locked On Sports Today, or watch for free in the Amazon Fire TV channels app. So, talked a little bit about Jace Jung. Again, even if he's not called up, I still think it's important to check in on him because he is like the most like impending kind of looming prospect that would get called up to help the offense. So even if it's not and he's still weeks or months away and this is just totally again like he stubbed his toe or something, I still think it's good. On an off day, we have time, we can kind of catch up on one of the bigger name prospects within the organization. But I think the biggest question here is what the defense looks like with or without him going forward. And I think that's really centered around Colt Keith more than it is Jace Jung. And this is not my brainchild. I want to make that abundantly clear. This is not my like original thought intake that I put out into the world. I'm discussing someone else's work. Okay. So Evan Petzold has done a great job. He's been talking about the potential of moving Colt Keith to first base rather often in articles and on his podcast, Days of Roar with Mark. Great people, great everything. And then Rogelio Castillo over at Motor City Metrics, another great human being, having lunch with him this weekend, is another person who has wrote about this and talked about this very publicly. Okay, so I just want to make that abundantly clear. That other people were kind of the origin of this idea, but I think it's definitely worth a conversation, and it stems from the fact that Colt Keith has struggled mightily defensively at second base. Now, going into the year, that was a talking point we had, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in the week, but one of the things we talked about here was, you know, I just want him to not look completely lost at second base. That's really that was my bar as a rookie, was just don't look completely overwhelmed and like it's too much to handle. And I think for the last month and a half, it's kind of looked like too much to handle. He has really struggled there. He's grading out very poorly, like analytically. He's making errors, which is not a very analytical thing, but he's also struggling with, in just eye test. If you don't look at any numbers whatsoever, you can just watch him out there, and he's athletic, but the effectiveness of him at second just hasn't been there. And he's a big dude, right? He's a large second baseman. And so, again, Evan and Raj and a few other people, I'm sure our other beat writers have talked about it as well. Those are just the two places that I personally have seen it, is talking about an impending move of him to first base and how that would look. I think there's a lot of trains of thought with that happening. One is that Colt Keith, I think, is built to be a pretty decent first baseman, and that's first and foremost, right? Again, he's athletic. He's got the size. I don't think that is a ridiculous thing. I don't think it's ridiculous to think that he could be a solid, I'm not saying a Gold Glover over there, but just like a solid, fine first baseman defensively. I think then you throw Jace Jung into the mix and you go, okay, well, that lets him play his natural position. He was drafted, Jace Jung was drafted as a second baseman, came up through the system as a second baseman, and just this year is playing third because of Colt Keith moving from third to second. So they switched positions, right? So I think if you were to move Keith to first base, that obviously that then opens the opportunity, whether we're talking about this weekend or whether we're talking about, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, either way, it opens up the door for him to take some reps at second base. But the big elephant in the room amongst this whole thing when you're talking big picture, not just this weekend, but big picture is long-term Spencer Torkelson. It always seems to go back to Torque, really, at the end of the day. Every single conversation we have on this freaking show, there's always seems to somehow lead us back to Torque. Look, I'm not saying that like there's no chance that Torkelson can make adjustments and be good, even though we're still waiting to see him make like legitimate major, I will call them, because he's definitely made small adjustments here and there, but like major, noticeable eye test adjustments with his swing. We're certainly still waiting to see those. He hasn't been hitting well in Toledo the last little over a week now after getting off to a hot start when he first got demoted. I think right now, well, let's actually not start right now. Let's start with when we drafted Torque. This organization has not let anyone play first base. First base in this organization is an absolute barren wasteland. There is no one outside of Spencer Torkelson at any level that is a legitimate, like, oh, this is a pure first baseman. It's either a guy that plays another position that's playing there because they need someone to play there, or it's someone who just like legitimately doesn't have, like long-term aspirations to be a piece of this puzzle long-term at the major league level. And it's been like that since we got Torque because he was the number one overall pick and was a first baseman. I think we have to face the music a little bit and throw that out the window. Let other people play first base, man. Like, I don't know why Justin Henry Malloy hasn't got any reps at first base. And maybe he has, like, behind closed doors or without media or whatever. But to our knowledge, this dude hasn't been given an opportunity at first. Why not? Right now, he's a rookie DH, essentially. And that leads us back to Colt Keith, where I think you cannot. This is the if you were to take anything out of this conversation, it is this. You cannot go into 2025 with Spencer Torkelson being your only option at first base. I don't care if he gets called up after the All-Star break and hits decently well, right? He would have to go on an absolute redonkulous tear in the second half for me to be like, all right, yeah, don't even have a safety valve. Like, just roll with Torque next year. He figured it out. He fixed it. We're good. He would have to go on an absolute tear for me to believe that. So you have to have other options. Now, whether that's going out and signing somebody who can play multiple positions, one of those being first base. They kind of did that this year, right? Gio Urshela's played first base. Andy Ibanez has played some first base. Mark Canha was acquired. He's played some first base, right? They addressed it a little bit more this year. But I think that part of the development path of guys, again, like Colt Keith and like Justin Henry Malloy, need to be far more integrated into a potential that they may be playing first base long term. Now, the thing with both of these guys, Malloy and Keith being, is that none of this matters if neither of them hit. Right? Like, that is, I can already hear, like, people listening to this and saying, why are we even talking about this? Colt Keith has a 590 OPS. Like, you're right. You are 100% correct. I'm not trying to like jump the gun on that either. But this whole team right now is ifs, all of it, right? It's hoping that people can turn it around. So I'm pointing to my calendar. I don't know why I thought that anyone would know that my calendar in my room is right here, but it's, a bunch of ifs on if you can turn this around. And if it, with the last week or so in June and then heading into the All-Star break, you can win some games. Like, in order to do that, like we talked about earlier in the week, you're just banking on hope. You're banking on a hope that somebody can turn it around. So that's all this team is at the present moment, is just a lot of what ifs. What if we do this? What if we do this? Would this help? Would this help? I'm down for anything, right? This has been a train wreck of the last 2 weeks for this organization. I'm totally down for anything. And I think it's a great point by, again, Ev and Raj, and I'm sure Cody Stavenhagen and Evan Woodbury and McCoskey and Jason Beck, I'm sure those guys have all written it to some extent or put something out there about Colt Keith switching positions at well, because it's been the talk of the town lately, which is why we're talking about it here. But I think that is an incredibly fair conversation to have, given his struggles at second, your actual assumed first baseman's struggles at first base. And the thing is, even if Torkelson started mashing, he's still been a dreadful defensive first baseman, right? So if Colt Keith is even a remotely average hitter, let's just play that game, right? Let's say Colt Keith is a I don't know, 750 OPS hitter. He's nothing super special. He doesn't reach that ceiling that a lot of people, myself included, thought that he would reach at one point. But he's a solid, around major league average hitter. Spencer Torkelson figures it out. Oh my goodness, he figured it out. Boom. Okay, he's mashing, right? Jace Jung gets called up. Great. We got to find a spot for him. Now, you don't have, unless you think Matt Vierling is the long-term answer at third base, which I guess there are some people out there that are of that belief. I think Vierling's a really good super utility type of player. But I think that opens the door for Torkelson to just be your DH, and you still can go through with this, right? Like, this is not contingent on Torkelson hitting, because he's been so unbelievably poor defensively as well. I think it's absolutely worth a conversation worth having, and I just hope that this organization stops doing, like, how wild and ridiculous is it that throughout all levels of the minors and like the GM of this team, the president of baseball operations rather of this team, and the manager have been so vocal about, we would need you to play a bunch of different positions, right? Everybody needs to be versatile. You need to be able to play as many different positions as possible. That'll get you in the lineup more, et cetera, et cetera. All of AJ's, lineup stuff where people are bouncing around positions and spots in the lineup all over the place. Yet first base is just off limits because we have Torkelson. No. No. And like, going into the year, there was a little bit more of an argument for that because no one saw Torkelson being, struggling as much as he did and getting demoted in June. But like, now, what on earth do you have to lose? Reps for Gio Urshela and Mark Canha in 2024 at first base? I don't know. Like I said, this isn't even really contingent on Young getting called up specifically, although if he is, then obviously it opens the door for a right side of the infield of Keith and Young. But I don't even know, like, does Colt Keith have reps at first base? Like, is that, I don't want the first time he ever plays first base in his life to be, in a Major League Baseball game, preferably. But I just think it's ridiculous that for an organization that has driven the point home of positional versatility more than any organization on the planet, that they just don't have anybody they're developing in-house to play first base because of Torkelson, and that's it. It's absurd to me. It's mind-boggling. It doesn't make any sense. So I wanted to voice my frustrations there. I wanted to point out this great point that a few other brilliant baseball minds have pointed out, had the conversation about my opinions of it and the possibility of it. And now we're done. Okay, so let's preview the weekend and talk a little bit about the awesome baseball game between the Cardinals and the Giants on Thursday night. We will do all of that right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at Tax Network USA. Here on Locked On Tigers, we pride ourselves in getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year round. You know what else is year round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A-plus rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/locked on. See the link in this episode description below. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So we talked a lot about the defensive future of the infield, we'll call it, and a lot of different moving pieces and parts and possibilities surrounding the Detroit Tigers. So moving on to the weekend, we're going to preview the White Sox game in a second, but I want to start with the baseball game that was played between the Cardinals and the Giants at Rickwood Field on Thursday night and just give baseball and everybody that was involved with that production and ball game all the credit in the world. That was unbelievably awesome. And I hope that it is a regular occurrence, right? Like we saw with the Field of Dreams game, we were like, oh, maybe this will be an every year thing. And then they just stopped doing it. I hope that people realized how important shedding light and shining light on all of these players and all of the beautiful and not beautiful history of this great game and all of the living players who have played on that field before and really giving it the moment in the spotlight that everybody involved with that truly deserved. Also, Bob Kendrick I want him to do a podcast. I want to listen to that dude tell stories about baseball players every single night. I could listen to him talk about baseball, I think, forever and be happy. You know, when people are like, oh, like what would you bring on a desert island? If you could bring one thing, I think I would just bring unlimited recordings of Bob Kendrick talking about baseball. That is obviously the president of the Negro League Museum and Hall of Fame, which is also a must attend. I've been with my father. It is one of the coolest things ever. Just again, awesome. Like everything about that game. Also, it was a great game on the field, which I think helped the product as well. But just honoring so many players who have played on that field over the years. Obviously, the passing of Willie Mays earlier in the week and having that just weighing so heavily on the crowd and the players and the media members and everybody who was there for this event. And the crowd was wonderful. Willie Mays' son was there and talked to the crowd, and there were chants, and there was a big 24 painted on the field, and everything about it was just awesome. Willie Mays' son had said, he before the game, he was on the mic and he said, my dad said that he would do anything to be here for this game. And he found his own way to do that. And I think that was just such an emotional start to an emotional evening with so much history, again, good and bad, important, right? Important to know and so important to talk about. And I loved it genuinely. Like I cannot say enough good things about how the entire evening went at Rickwood Field. And so I want to give everybody who was involved with that their flowers, but I also just want to, again, just say how awesome and important I think everything that we saw on Thursday night was. And what a cool night for baseball, right? What a beautiful and poetic night for the game of baseball. And it really, how can you not be romantic about baseball? The greatest thing on this planet. And it's nights like that, which again means that they knocked it out of the park, no pun intended. It's nights like that that really make you, remember that. Love this beautiful, dumb, stupid game. Let's talk White Sox this weekend. Please win. My goodness, please win. Talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show. The White Sox on Friday, the matchup is this is a 6:40 start time, by the way, and then back-to-back day games. Play at 1:10 on Saturday and 1:40 on Sunday. But the Friday evening game, I'm assuming that means we'll be in the City Connects, right? Friday night. I think that's the Friday night home games. I think as we break those bad boys out, it's going to be Jack Flaherty against Eric Fedde. And Fedde has a 3.09 ERA, a pretty solid amount of strikeouts, and a 5-1 record on this White Sox team. Okay, turn the doorknob, open the door, let that porcelain sink in. That's wild to be 5-1 on the 2024 Chicago White Sox. So this is a guy that was struggling with the Nationals, really was, barely major league caliber pitcher, had a really high ERA, went and pitched in the KBO, was lights out over there, and now has come back and has a 3 ERA and is winning games with one of the worst teams I've ever seen. So you're going to have your work cut out for you. And like Jack Flaherty's been a revelation and has been incredible and is a borderline all-star, if not an all-star caliber player right now, at least. So you have, you got a stable full of dogs as well, right? That is not a saying, but you have really good pitchers too, right? This isn't like, oh, it's Eric Fedde, we're going to lose. Like you have a really good pitcher on the mound against a horrific offense. That is something to watch out for. If there's anything positive to watch out for the White Sox, that's it. Besides that, win 3 games, right? And like if they take 2 of 3, fine, right? Good for you, I guess. But you're about to play a 3-game set against the Phillies right after. How quickly a sweep could turn into 3-3 over a 6-game stretch if you don't sweep. That didn't make sense. If you do anything less than sweep, you got your work cut out for you going forward. And this is a team that, again, is on pace to win like barely more than 40 games. So maybe let's take care of business. Hey, I don't really have too much else to say. Like, honestly, like usually on off days previews, we go a little bit more in depth. What is there to say? The White Sox are terrible. You have been terrible. If you want anyone to get back on board, you need to probably take 3. And if you don't, then this next month is going to get real interesting. If you lose this series, like I said earlier in the week, man, you're not only going to get the trade rumors around Flaherty and Foley and whatever, like smaller ones like Ibanez and Urshela maybe and whatnot. You're going to get very loud, screaming, all of us in our face, Tarek Skubal trade talk if you drop this series and just never recover after. Wow. Ending on a high note. So let's win some games. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day, and we will be back on Monday. Win, lose, or draw stuff. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch you on Monday, baby. Go Tigers.